Hello, this is Melanie Guralnick, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the July 14th issue of the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The first story is 6 kilometers from home, Stan Cho lives the sweet life in taxpayer-funded hotels. Sweet, spelled S-U-I-T-E, by Brian Lilly. You have to wonder what Stan Cho, Doug Ford's tourism minister, was thinking when he billed taxpayers $16,000 for hotel rooms over a 3-year period in Toronto. The news, broken early Tuesday morning by Global News, surely has Cho hanging his head in shame as he figures out how to pay it all back. Yes, Minister Cho, who lives in Toronto, will reimburse the Treasury, not because it is the right thing to do, but because he got caught. In fact, while Cho now says he will pay back the total amount, when initially contacted by Global, he only promised to pay back expenses that didn't, quote, meet the spirit of the policy. Having read the policy, I am sure Cho did before submitting the expenses, none of which he has billed taxpayers on this front meets the letter of the spirit of the regulations. Under the rules of the legislature, MPs who live out of town are allowed taxpayer-funded apartments in Toronto. Under special circumstances, such as late-night sittings until midnight, a massive snowstorm, or unforeseen circumstances, Toronto MPs can bill for overnight accommodations. The rule states that MPPs, quote, may be reimbursed for actual costs of accommodation in Toronto if the costs are incurred due to special or unusual circumstances while on business as a member of the Legislative Assembly. Stan Cho lives just over 6 kilometers away from the legislature. Minutes from home, nights out on the public tab. He could drive the route in 20 minutes or less. He could take the subway and be home in about 25 minutes. An Uber would be about $20. Instead, he's been billing the taxpayers for pretty expensive hotel rooms, especially of late. In fiscal year 2023 through 24, Cho billed for $1,431 worth of hotel rooms, increasing to $3,081 in fiscal year 2024 through 25. In fiscal year 25 through 26, things really took off, with Cho billing the taxpayer $11,691 for accommodation in Toronto. In December of last year, he billed $6,367.97 for his hotel stays, which if you average it out for every night of the month, works out to $205 per night. Given that this is supposed to be for exceptional circumstances, how many nights was Cho staying downtown in December? Or what kind of swanky palatial hotel room was he staying in? Opposition right to pounce. This is a blatant abuse of taxpayer dollars, said NDP leader Marit Stiles. The people of Ontario are breaking their backs to buy groceries. Meanwhile, Minister Cho is living the sweet life on their dime. I don't agree with Marit Stiles often, but she's absolutely right here. Cho is living the sweet life, and you and I are paying for it. It's ridiculous. How many hotel stays were billed? How much money will actually be repaid? Will the minister be allowed to keep his job after the scandal? A scandal that could reshape the cabinet. All of Fraser's questions are valid, but that last one can only be answered by Premier Ford. He hasn't fired Cho yet, but the day is still young. We know a cabinet shuffle of some sort is likely coming before the legislature returns in October, given that Ford has to replace Caroline Mulroney, whose job as Treasury Board President is being performed by Finance Minister Peter Bethlen-Falvey. Traditionally, Ford doesn't like big cabinet shuffles. He prefers small moves, filling in gaps where he sees them. With this expense foolishness, Cho has given Ford a reason to consider a wider shuffle. In the depths of summer, politics at Queen's Park just got interesting. There is a picture of Stan Cho, the Ontario Minister of Tourism. He is speaking at the Ontario Science Centre in Toronto on June 29th, and he is speaking in front of a microphone wearing a nice suit. His black hair is pretty short. He's got his hand up in the air, just kind of trying to emphasize whatever he's saying. And then there are two men in the background turning and looking at him, and they're slightly out of focus. Photo courtesy of Peter Power via Postmedia. That story was 6 kilometers from home. Stan Cho lives the sweet life in taxpayer-funded hotels, by Brian Lilly. The next story is teen still obsessed with killers despite apologizing for Pickering Sr.'s murder, by Michelle Mandel. The boy who savagely murdered a Pickering grandmother gardening on her front lawn last year still has an ongoing fascination with serial killers and has no insight into the devastation he has caused. When he recently got into a fight with another peer at his youth detention facility, court heard he chillingly told staff that he hadn't felt this alive since he stabbed Eleanor Doney, 83, to death on May 29, 2025. How terrifying is that? As the lanky teen sat at his sentencing hearing in Oshawa on Tuesday, dressed in his black suit and white shirt, both Crown and defense agreed the now 15-year-old should be given the maximum 10-year youth sentence for first-degree murder. 6 years of detention and 4 additional years under strict supervision in the community, with an intensive rehabilitative custody and supervision order that would provide the boy with the intensive mental health treatment he needs. Asked if he had anything to say, the teen rose and told the court he's deeply sorry, but asked not to be defined by what he's done. Fortunately for him, he can't be. The anonymity of the Youth Criminal Justice Act will guard his identity forever. Request for adult sentence abandoned. That wouldn't have been the case if he'd been sentenced as an adult. The Crown had originally served notice they'd be seeking an adult sentence, but court heard that plan was abandoned following a July 2025 Supreme Court decision that requires prosecutors to prove a young offender had adult-like maturity to be sentenced as an adult, and the psychological reports in this teen's case showed he does not. While Superior Court Justice Lisa Wanamaker was presented with a joint submission on the sentence, his lawyer Aaron Dan asked the judge to grant the teen 1 year of credit for the 13 months he's already spent in youth detention since his May 2025 arrest, leaving him just 5 more years in custody. It was a request strenuously opposed by Assistant Crown Attorney Tammy Deary. Quote, "This was a completely unprovoked, random, extremely violent attack on an innocent woman cleaning up her yard on a spring day," Deary said. "This brutal attack occurred in Miss Doney's yard in the middle of the afternoon, a place where she was entitled to feel safe and likely did feel safe. The offense and facts of this case, in my submission, fall at the most serious end of the spectrum." Effect on victim's family overwhelming. According to the agreed statement of facts, he was carrying a briefcase and dressed in a long black coat, black medical face mask, and black gloves, the guise of his favorite manga serial killer Yoshikage Kira, when he stopped outside Doney's home on Lynn Heights Drive just before 3 p.m. and struck up a conversation with the elderly woman. After just a few minutes, he suddenly pulled a knife out of his briefcase and began to stab the helpless retired kindergarten teacher. As she tried to flee, he chased her down, stabbing her repeatedly before leaving her to die. The statement said a police examination of his electronic devices showed that in the weeks leading up to the murder, There was a new and increasingly intense interest in sociopathy and psychopathy, serial killers, stabbing, stalking, and avoiding detection, and he'd confessed he had an urge to kill. The impact of the senseless slaying on Doni's family, friends, and community has been overwhelming, De'Arie said. She was the primary caregiver for her ailing husband of 63 years, and after her murder he had to move to a long-term care home where his health has declined. 5 years in custody, considerable. The boy's lawyer acknowledged her client's inexplicably horrific murder of a beloved, smart, compassionate, and faithful woman. But Dan also insisted there were some indications of good prospects for rehabilitation, and he might actually develop remorse and empathy if his serious mental health needs are addressed. 5 more years in custody is long enough to do that, she argued. 6 years, she warned, would mean that when he turns 20, he could be transferred to an adult prison. By serving 5 years, he'll have spent a third of his life in detention, Dan said, and by the time his strict supervision in the community is over, it will be 2035. This will reflect more than 41% of his life at that time. This is a considerable sentence for someone so young. But is it enough for someone capable of such heartless cruelty? Wanamaker is expected to deliver her decision on Wednesday morning. There is an undated picture of Eleanor Doni with her husband Bruce. It's taken in their living room, and they're both sitting on the couch together, and they're petting their black dog that looks like a lab. And she's got short gray hair, she's smiling, and her husband next to her has gray hair and a beard and mustache with his arm around her, smiling. Photo courtesy of Facebook. That story was Teen Still Obsessed with Killers Despite Apologizing for Pickering Sr.'s Murder by Michelle Mandel. The next story is Kevin O'Leary Roasts Justin Trudeau After Dancing Katy Perry's Post by Mark Danielle. Canadian business mogul Kevin O'Leary is taking aim at Justin Trudeau after the former Prime Minister went viral following his cameo in a TikTok video posted by his girlfriend Katy Perry. Amid news this month that 4 in 10 Canadian manufacturers plan to move production to the U.S., and reports that his successor, Mark Carney, has had the worst first year of growth for a Prime Minister since 1963, Trudeau decided to treat Canadians to a glimpse of his dancing by hopping like a rabbit in a social media video to promote Perry's new single, Watch It Burn. In the midst of a run of shows in Europe, Trudeau's paramour posted a TikTok video of herself and some friends dancing to the new song, with the caption, quote, "Ancient texts say that if you hop to the song, you will get 1,000 years of good luck." As Perry and her pals bounced around to the track, eagle-eyed followers spotted a grinning Trudeau jumping through the shot. But as the clip racked up millions of views on social media, the former Liberal leader earned brutal reviews from O'Leary and thousands of others for his garbage moves. As Trudeau's bop racked up more than 1 million views, the O'Leary Ventures chairman took a swipe at the 54-year-old's economic policies and, quote, lack of executional skills during his time as Prime Minister. He also accused Trudeau of helping architect Canada's economic slide, which has found the country sliding into a recession. After ex-user Wealth Moose called it sad to see Trudeau resort to this kind of childish behavior, O'Leary mocked the former drama teacher's tenure as Prime Minister. Quote, "What is wrong with bouncing around like a bunny rabbit after taking #Canada, #G7 countries, #GDP to the bottom of the #G20 measured by every economic metric?" the celebrity investor asked. How? A complete lack of executional skills. That is incredibly hard to do, but at Justin Trudeau did it in just 10 years. A fantastic achievement. Let's dance! You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In response to the Canada Proud X account, which jabbed that it was, quote, good to see that Trudeau finally has a job he's qualified for, O'Leary bluntly pointed to Trudeau's dismal record while in office. Quote, the longest run of a hashtag Canadian Prime Minister in history with absolutely no executional skills that left his nation at the bottom of the hashtag G20 after 10 years of incompetence, he wrote. Meanwhile, other social media accounts edited Trudeau's dance into a variety of videos meant to highlight his disastrous policies, including one that showed him bouncing alongside former NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, who helped keep the Liberals in power long enough to qualify for his parliamentary pension. The worst manager Canada has ever had. During Trudeau's time in office, O'Leary regularly criticized the then Prime Minister, saying it was horrific what's happening to this country. Before Trudeau resigned in early 2025, O'Leary lashed out at the politician's ineffective leadership as his poll numbers hit all-time lows. Quote, I want to choose my words carefully here, because I want to be supportive of Canada. I'm a big believer in its potential. The self-proclaimed Mr. Wonderful began. When you look at the per capita of Canada, and you look at the natural resources per capita, it's one of the richest countries on earth, run by complete idiots. There's no other way to put it. You might as well tell the truth. O'Leary continued his tirade by saying Trudeau must be thanked for his service, and then shown the door by Canadians before the next election was slated to take place. He is the worst manager Canada has ever had. Total incompetency underneath him in the cabinet seats. Total incompetency in almost every mandate. Absolutely the worst I've ever seen, O'Leary said. This is a totally incompetent government from the top down. The worst managers in the country's history. Until Trudeau was gone, O'Leary predicted Canadian business and economic growth would remain stagnant. But he also warned Canadians about the danger of electing Carney, who he called Trudeau all over again on steroids. When Trudeau's relationship with Perry became Instagram official last December, O'Leary weighed in on the romance as he advised Perry to get a prenup. Quote, if I were Katy Perry, I would get a prenup right now because he'll bankrupt her in 6 weeks, he told Interview magazine. That guy is known as the Idiot King. He destroyed a country like never before. He has no executional skills whatsoever, no understanding of policy, had no idea how to run a country, brought the Canadian people to their knees in debt, and now he's going to do the same thing to her. There is an X-Post link by RTN Toronto that has a link to Katy Perry singing to this song of hers, and there's multiple people hopping in the background, kind of spinning and hopping. And then, like, kind of partway through, you see Justin Trudeau behind her, and she's just facing the camera singing. And it's just kind of random and kind of cool. Courtesy of RTN Toronto. There is also an X post by Kevin O'Leary, aka Mr. Wonderful, where he took that clip that I just mentioned and he slowed it down like super slow motion, just the part where Justin Trudeau kind of spins around and hops from one side to the other. Makes him look extra dorky. Courtesy of Kevin O'Leary. That story was Kevin O'Leary roasts Justin Trudeau after dance in Katy Perry's post by Mark Danielle. The next story is Circle K clerk says he followed store policy in $12.8 million lottery ticket dispute by Anne Bacani. A former Circle K store clerk says he was simply following company policy as he fights for ownership of a winning lottery ticket worth $12.8 million. Circle K filed a complaint in February against longtime employee Robert Galica, accusing him of trying to claim a winning lottery ticket that a customer left behind at the Scottsdale, Arizona store. On November 24, 2025, according to ABC 15, AZ Family, and 12 News Phoenix. Court documents state that the customer bought several tickets for the Pick lottery game. Galica reportedly printed $85 worth of tickets, but the customer only had $60, leaving 25 tickets behind near the cash register, where they were available for anyone to buy, ABC 15 reported. The tickets remained in the store overnight. After the winning numbers were drawn the next day, Galica finished his shift and bought the abandoned tickets from another employee, according to the lawsuit. Following Circle K's unwritten store policy. Galica's lawyer, Josh Kalsrud, argues his client did exactly what employees were expected to do. He told ABC 15 there was an unwritten store policy requiring staff to buy accidentally printed, unsold lottery tickets. Kalsrud said Galica even checked with his supervisor before making the purchase. Quote, "So, if you accidentally print them out and they go unsold, it's the industry practice for the person who prints them out to be responsible to pay for them. If not the person, then the store manager," Kalsrud told ABC 15, adding that another employee completed the sale. "My client, he wanted to do the right thing," Kalsrud said. Circle K only challenged the purchase after realizing the ticket was worth millions. Quote, "They only changed their minds once he said, 'Well, the winning ticket is $12.8 million. And they said, 'Whoa, hold on for a second. Now let's talk about that,'" Kalsrud told AZ Family. According to AZ Family, Galica's latest court filing includes 6 affidavits from current and former Circle K employees who support his claim that the policy existed. Kalsrud also told ABC 15 and 12 News that Galica was fired on January 30th after 20 years with the company for allegedly violating store policy. Quote, "He loved his job. He would love to go back," Kalsrud said. "He's not there anymore because he did do the right thing. He tried to follow all the policies, letter for letter, word for word, and he got fired for it." Who legally owns the winning ticket? Circle K previously told People it is committed to working with the Arizona Lottery and asked the court to determine who legally owns the ticket. Quote, "That commitment is precisely why we have asked the court how best to proceed under these unique circumstances," the company said. It is not accurate to characterize this as a lawsuit against any specific party. It is a declaratory judgment complaint filed to seek clarity from the court to determine rightful ownership of this lottery ticket. The company has not responded to the latest filing. The Arizona Lottery is still holding the $12.8 million prize, which Galica reportedly plans to split with a former coworker. While the court decides who is legally entitled to the jackpot, WSAW-TV reports. There is a picture of Robert Galica, and it's kind of a close-up picture of him. He is looking at the camera while he's holding the winning lottery ticket. He's like a heavyset guy with medium brown hair, and he's wearing glasses. Photo courtesy of Screenshot via 12 News Phoenix. That story was Circle K clerk says he followed store policy in $12.8 million lottery ticket dispute. By Ann Bacani. The next story is Why Toronto's Second Heat Wave of July Isn't That Unusual? By Jane Stevenson. Toronto was on its way to setting a heat record on Tuesday with maximum temperatures expected to hit 37 degrees Celsius and feel more like 45 degrees Celsius with the Humidex. Although there was nothing unusual about the city's second heat wave so far in July. The first heat wave, which saw Environment Canada issue an orange warning, was from June 30th to July 4. The most recent heat event, which saw the lesser yellow warning issued, started Monday. It was supposed to end by Wednesday or Thursday night, with Tuesday being the hottest day. We certainly have done it before, the Weather Network meteorologist Doug Gillum said. The previous heat event, the Humidex peaked at 48 degrees Celsius at Pearson. Now that is unusual, but to have two heat events in July is not unusual. It is true that both events have pushed the upper limits of typical Toronto heat. So 48 degrees Celsius Humidex is brutal, but the record is 50.3 degrees Celsius, set in 2011. So we came up short. Daily record still in sight. Still, Gillum said Tuesday's high was about 10 degrees Celsius above the seasonal average, and the daily record-setting high temperature for Toronto is 36.8 degrees Celsius, set in 1995. Our forecast is to reach 37 degrees Celsius, so if we reach the forecast, we break the record. But if we were only to get to 36.5 degrees Celsius, which would still be a pretty good forecast, we wouldn't even have a daily record, he said. So it's exceptionally hot, for sure. To put it in perspective, Toronto Pearson has only been warmer than 37 degrees Celsius only 6 times on record. So Tuesday, there were models calling for 37 to 38 degrees. So we'll have to just see how warm Tuesday gets. Gillum said numerous factors were causing the latest heat event, including a heat dome to the west. A strong area of high pressure in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere, he said. It's a lot of sinking air. When air sinks, it heats up, and that has spread east. This is a pretty short heat wave for Toronto. It's one day of extreme heat. Whereas we had several days with the previous event where we had the Humidex in the mid-40s. What's most exceptional is Armstrong, Ontario, which is way north, and there's no urban heat influences there. They got to 40.8 degrees on Monday, so that is historic for them. Relief expected soon. The heat wave was forecast to end Tuesday night for some regions in central and northeastern Ontario, but persist into Wednesday or Thursday for areas in southern Ontario. Wednesday will not be as hot as Tuesday, but it still will be over 30 degrees Celsius in terms of the actual temperature, said Gillum. Gillum also predicts Toronto will get a third heat wave in early August. I think the week where we transition into early August, I'm watching for another potential heat wave, he said. It'll probably only be a few days, but I think most of August will be near normal. So you get these high-impact heat events, but they're relatively short-lived and they don't dominate the summer. That story was Why Toronto's Second Heat Wave of July Isn't That Unusual, by Jane Stevenson. The next story is How Brandon Pridham and Nick Robertson Reunited with Kyle Dubas in Pittsburgh, by Lance Hornby. Kyle Dubas is bringing another former Maple Leaf to help the Pittsburgh Penguins, this time in the front office, while officially landing Nick Robertson. On Tuesday, the Pens announced they had avoided a salary arbitration and signed streaky winger Robertson to a 2-year contract with a $3.25 million AAV. Then Sportnet's Elliot Friedman reported later in the day that Brandon Pridham was joining the front office. Pridham, whose salary cap gymnastics kept general manager Dubas from straying over the bar many times as the Leafs flirted with a tight allocation of dollars resulting from large salaries to their top players, will have the same duties in Pittsburgh. Pridham will be the Pens hockey operations consultant, handling contracts and planning, replacing Vuki Mpofu, who joined Chris McFarland's staff in Nashville as assistant GM. Many thought Pridham would follow Dubas to Pittsburgh after the latter's firing in Toronto. But Pridham stayed for 2 seasons under successor Brad Treliving. It's believed he interviewed for the Leafs GM job that John Chayka took. Meanwhile, Pridham's role on the team has yet to be filled. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. What's happening with the Robertsons? For Robertson, a roller coaster career as a Leaf came to an end on July 1, when the Leafs qualified the restricted free agent, then traded him for a 2028 fourth-round pick. Robertson had consecutive seasons of 14 goals, 15 goals, and a career-high 16 goals after Dubas's second-round pick in 2019 had struggled early in his career with injuries. Robertson tended to get on a goal roll with his hard shot and zeal, though they were mixed with bouts of inconsistency, and he could not break through to play in the top 6. The Leafs also needed more from him in the playoffs, where he had 2 goals and 1 assist in 13 games. Robertson had hoped to end up somewhere with brother Jason, a more accomplished soccer who is also a restricted free agent and now in trade limbo with the Dallas Stars. After a 45-goal year, Jason voided a proposed deal that would have sent him to Seattle, and rumors persist that Dubas will try to acquire him and sign him to a long-term deal before a scheduled July 25th arbitration date with Dallas that would set up a 1-year contract and take Robertson into unrestricted free agency. New Jersey and Detroit are other clubs interested in the Stars' winger, as it's believed Jason wants to play somewhere in the Eastern Conference. There is a picture of Nick Robertson of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He is skating with the puck, and he's like very low to the ground, and he's looking off to the side. He's wearing a blue uniform. He's number 89, and yeah, he looks great. Photo courtesy of Claus Anderson via Getty Images. That story was how Brandon Pridham and Nick Robertson reunited with Kyle Dubas in Pittsburgh, by Lance Hornby. The next story is Canada Keeps Rewarding Those Who Stay After Their Visas Expire, by Brian Lilly. A recent tribunal ruling in Ontario saying illegal immigrants are entitled to welfare may look like a single case, but it could turn into 4 million cases. That's how many temporary visas are expiring between last year and this year. And the Liberal government in Ottawa has no plan to ensure people leave. Over the past several years, the Liberals ramped up the number of temporary foreign workers and foreign students given permission to enter Canada. With millions of visas set to expire, we know many of them won't be going home. They will just stay here. In fact, in the case that resulted in Ontario's Social Benefits Tribunal ruling that illegal immigrants can get welfare, the man in question entered the country legally and never left. The Ford government has smartly said they will change the regulations to ensure this doesn't happen again. The adjudicator in the tribunal went out of their way to twist the language in the regulations to arrive at their decision. Quote, "Our government will always be there to support people on hard times. But that doesn't include people living in Canada illegally. If provincial regulations need to be changed to make that crystal clear, we'll change them." Ontario Premier Doug Ford posted on social media. One case now, but potentially millions. This ruling out of Ontario is one ruling, but bad ideas don't stay where they are born. And with millions of people potentially following the path of not leaving, we could see more of this. Sadly, it's not just welfare payments where the taxpayer gets hosed for offering government services to people who pay no tax and have no legal status in Canada. At least 2 universities, both in Toronto of course, have programs to allow students with, quote, precarious immigration status to pay domestic tuition rates instead of the much higher international rates. York University began their Sanctuary Scholar program in 2017. Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly Ryerson, followed shortly thereafter. A basic arts degree at York costs just over $6,000 annually, whereas international students pay about $40,000. Domestic tuition for an engineering degree will set you back just over $10,000 per year, but international students would pay $47,000. Clearly, we are providing incentives for people to declare that they have, quote, precarious immigration status to save tens of thousands of dollars. Incentives that encourage people to stay. We are also offering incentives for people who are not real refugees to declare asylum in Canada. Housing supports, a work permit, a health plan better than what Canadians receive from their government plan, and more. Is it any wonder that we have gone from 16,592 asylum claims in 2015 to 190,039 in 2024, and a current backlog of 294,989? Our asylum system has gone from being a safety valve for people fleeing war and persecution to a backdoor immigration stream. In 2025, there were 107,802 new asylum applicants, and just 50,067 people were accepted, a 46% acceptance rate. Following a failed American path. Between decisions on welfare, sanctuary scholar programs, cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, among others, declaring themselves sanctuary cities, and the abuse of our system, we are in danger of following the American path. In the United States, there is total confusion between legal and illegal immigration, with opposition to the latter driving down support for the former. We don't want to go down that road, but it appears some are trying to drag us in that direction. Canadians should unite behind a sensible but scaled-back legal immigration system while rejecting the abuse of our system. Rejecting abuse includes saying no to welfare payments for people here illegally, not allowing schools to offer domestic tuition to those who don't qualify, and ensuring that those who came here on temporary visas actually leave when their time is up. There is strong support for all of these measures with the Canadian public. There sadly isn't in Ottawa. That story was Canada Keeps Rewarding Those Who Stay After Their Visas Expire by Brian Lilly. The next story is 8-year Indigenous Parks Naming Saga Headed for City Council by Justin Holmes. That the City of Toronto has been stuck in a quagmire for 8 years in its search for an Indigenous name for a cluster of parks appears to be, in the view of local politicians, entirely unremarkable. Councillors at Tuesday's meeting of the Economic and Community Development Committee chose not to discuss, much less debate, the city's inability to confirm a name for a collection of green spaces and trails around the Lower Don. In 2018, some of those same councillors had endorsed, quote, Wanscotanoch Parklands, as a collective name for a handful of public parks along the Don River. However, a report prepared for the committee meeting says that 8 years later, no one can agree on how to spell Wanscotanoch or what it means. That 8-year search for a name, which the report recommends continue until at least 2027, comes even though City Hall's Parks and Rec Division has what appears to be $1 million a year fund for Indigenous renamings. Report to be considered at end of month. The report will be considered by City Council at the end of this month. The initial City Council vote on the Wansco-Tonach Parklands naming in April 2018 was unanimous. Paula Fletcher, in the only remarks about the naming at that meeting of Council, called it a great initiative. Alejandra Bravo, who chairs the committee, said at the start of Tuesday's meeting that she was holding back the vote on the report on Fletcher's behalf. That would allow Fletcher, who is not a member, to speak about the idea and publicly ask questions of city bureaucrats. Strangely, while Fletcher was in the room, the report wasn't discussed, and she left shortly after it was rubber-stamped. Bravo, dressed in a black t-shirt featuring a mock music concert motif and the letters ECDC for the committee, only asked for a quick show of hands, not a recorded vote. Quote, "I was holding it on behalf of Councillor Fletcher, but she has had everything dealt with," Bravo told the committee. Fletcher's office opted not to comment on the Wansco-Tonach report last week when contacted by the Toronto Sun, and did not respond to a follow-up about her appearance at Tuesday's meeting. The report recommends Council sign off on another year of the Indigenous-led naming process, followed by another report in mid-2027, quote, with a chosen Anishinaabe name for the Lower Don Parkland system and trail, along with an interpretive narrative for public use. Funding for, quote, continued Indigenous engagement and research and related work is to come out of Parks and Rec's Indigenous Placekeeping Capital Reserve. The process is expected to include a visit by the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are leading the naming in accordance with recommended cultural protocols per the report, to the Parkland system this summer. The Sun has asked the City of Toronto for details about the park's renaming fund, but has yet to get a response. While the fund isn't mentioned in Parks and Rec's 2026 budget documents, an appendix on its 2025 capital budget suggests more than $1 million has been allocated to the division's, quote, Reconciliation and Indigenous Placemaking Program for 2026. That document suggests at least $1 million will go toward that program every year until at least 2034. An earlier city report, dating to March 2018, says the parks of the Lower Don should have a collective name, as they are connected and contiguous, but these connections are not well known by most park users. The parkland includes Don Valley Brickworks Park, Todmorden Mills Park, and Riverdale Park, both east and west. But that report couldn't say for sure what Wansco-Tonach means. Quote, Wansco-Tonach is understood to be the Anishinaabe place name for the Don River, and likely translates to, quote, burning bright point, a possible reference to nighttime salmon spearfishing, the 2018 report says. Meanwhile, the more recent report says research by Alan Corbiere, an associate professor at York University's History Department, has revealed that considered translations and spellings may not be accurate. Alternative spellings include, I'm going to spell this, I don't think I could say it, Wasaishkodenayosh. Let me try to say that. Wasaishkodenayosh. And, God, here's another one. It's spelled Wasaishkstenaeyaush, which is pronounced Wasaishkastaniayuash, the report says. While renamings aren't being considered for the individual parks themselves, the report says, a new collective name could appear on about 24 signs. That the Lower Don report got an easy ride at the committee was not a shock, as most of its members, such as Councilors Bravo, Shelley Carroll, Asma Malik, and Chris Moyes, are close allies of Mayor Olivia Chow and regular supporters of City Hall's recent work to rename its public assets. There is a picture taken at Don Valley Brickworks Park in October 2014, so it's kind of old. And there's like a wood elevated platform where an older gentleman and a young boy, maybe like a grandpa and son, are fishing. And it's kind of blurry behind them, but you can see that it's very green. And you don't see water, but I assume it's there since they're putting their fishing poles that way. Photo courtesy of Ernest Dorazuk via the Toronto Sun Files. That story was 8-year Indigenous Parks naming saga headed for City Council by Justin Holmes. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next story is Toronto Mayoral Hopeful Fuming After Deadly Weekend on City Streets by Gordon Anderson. Toronto mayoral hopeful Brad Bradford didn't mince words regarding the blood-curdling scene on Saturday night, and more specifically, the comments made by some officials in the aftermath of the deadly violence. Quote, "I was watching the news conference like every other Torontonian, and I thought it was appalling to come out and say that things are extremely safe minutes after we had a mass shooting on St. Clair Avenue," Bradford said at his own news conference on Tuesday. Bradford was referring to remarks made by Toronto Police Deputy Chief Frank Barreto. The deputy chief said the city is, quote, "one of the safest cities in the world," just minutes after a double fatal shooting at the Salsa on St. Clair Festival that left the city reeling. Toronto police said on Monday afternoon that 20-year-old Cesar Vinces and 25-year-old Shaquan Kwashi were the two men killed. 5 people were hospitalized with gunshot wounds. The festival was canceled for Sunday. Bradford termed the remarks by Barreto as tone-deaf and said it was the wrong message to send to the public so soon after thousands of attendees had to run for cover to save their lives. "That is the wrong message. That is not how people feel," Bradford said. "We need leadership, whether it is at the Toronto Police or City Hall or any of our agencies that recognize that people don't feel safe in Toronto, and telling them what to think is not the right response." On Monday at police headquarters, Toronto Police Chief Myron Demichaux noted that shootings in Toronto are still down 26% compared to this time last year. Bradford said that numbers play lip service to how residents of the city genuinely feel. During Monday's news conference, Demichaux acknowledged that statistics don't mean that much in moments such as this. Quote, "It is very important for us to acknowledge that a weekend like this shakes our city," Demichaux said. "There are people who have lost loved ones. There are people who are injured in ways that are going to affect them for the rest of their lives. And at that moment, statistics don't mean that much. What matters is how people feel and what we do to restore the sense of safety and security." Speaking on safety and security, Bradford wasn't alone in his comments directed toward those in charge of keeping the peace. TLN Media Group Inc. President Aldo De Felice released a statement on Monday. He was reacting to the comments made by Demichaux and Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow on Monday, when they both said that street festivals will go on as planned. TLN is one of the organizers of the Salsa on St. Clair Festival. Quote, "Unless city officials provide concrete commitments to enhance policing and security on and around St. Clair Avenue, we will be discontinuing our involvement," De Felice said. "We refuse to subject any of our people, friends, clients, and community supporters to situations where public officials responsible for preventing crime and ensuring public safety, resist the community's calls to do better. Back to the numbers. Bradford once again returned to the sobering numbers. Quote, "More than a dozen people were shot in Toronto this past weekend. 3 of them are dead, and the message to the people who ran for their lives, who were shot, to the folks caught up in the stampede of panic, was look at the numbers," Bradford said. "I am not here to debate numbers with anybody. I am glad that shootings are going down. The numbers should be 0. But people can't conduct their lives according to statistics. Torontonians don't live in a spreadsheet of numbers. Nobody is checking the dashboard before they walk out the door with their kid. They ask one simple question: do I feel safe?" On Friday night in North York, Abdin Amin Aden of Toronto became the city's 18th homicide victim of the year. 2 others were seriously injured in the triple shooting. 3 suspects are being sought by the police. Also, just before 3:30 a.m. on Sunday, at a nightclub on Poulsen Street in the Portlands, there were 3 people found with gunshot wounds and 5 arrested. In that melee, a 13th person was allegedly hit by a fleeing vehicle and taken to hospital. Omar Abdul Singate, 25, of Brampton, faces numerous charges, including firearms offenses, forcible confinement, and robbery. As of Tuesday afternoon, no arrests have been made in the North York and Salsa on St. Clair cases. There is a picture of the mayoral candidate Brad Bradford. He's, I don't know, he looks maybe like he's 40, and he's wearing a really nice blue suit with a light blue shirt, and he's bald with brown eyes, a good-looking guy, and he is in the middle of speaking, so his mouth is open, and he's got both of his hands in the air as he is speaking with his hands and mouth. Photo courtesy of Ernest Dorzuk via the Toronto Sun Files. That story was Toronto mayoral hopeful fuming after deadly weekend on city streets, by Gordon Anderson. The next story is wildfire smoke to descend on southern Ontario, lowering GTA air quality, by Ling Hui. As Torontonians bake in one of the hottest days of the year, meteorologists are forecasting reduced air quality on Wednesday, as smoke from wildfires in northern Ontario drifts to southern parts of the province. According to the Weather Network, a strong jet stream is pushing the smoke southeast, creating hazy conditions with the smell of smoke possible in some areas of southern Ontario, beginning Wednesday and staying in place Thursday. As of Tuesday afternoon, Air Quality Ontario rated air quality in most areas of the GTA between low risk and moderate risk, with its Air Quality Health Index sitting at either 3 or 4 in the region. But things are forecasted to change Wednesday, with the Air Quality Health Index forecasted to rise to 5 in the GTA, with the colors on the scale going from yellow to orange, though it's still a moderate risk on the scale that ranges from 1 to 10 plus, with a color code that goes from blue to red. At-risk population urged to limit time outdoors. With the air quality risk pegged at moderate, Air Quality Ontario recommends people at risk consider reducing or rescheduling strenuous outdoor activities, while the general population don't have to modify their outdoor activities. Wildfire smoke can pose the greatest risk for the elderly, those with existing conditions, youths, and pregnant people, according to Health Canada. Regions under air quality alerts and wildfire threats. With over 100 wildfires burning in and across Ontario, Air Quality Ontario has issued 37 air quality alerts in the province as of Tuesday afternoon. Regions under alert include Lake Nipigon, Wabakimi, Parry Sound, Muskoka, Halliburton, Algonquin, Sault Ste. Marie, Superior East, Greater Sudbury and vicinity, and the city of Thunder Bay. An air quality alert is issued when the Air Quality Health Index reaches 7 or higher. Meanwhile, wildfire threats in northwestern Ontario have prompted evacuation orders to be issued for Armstrong, Collins First Nation, Cushing Lake, White Sand First Nation, and Lac des Mille Lacs First Nation. That story was Wildfire Smoke to Descend on Southern Ontario, Lowering GTA Air Quality by Ling Hui. The next story is Bonnie Crombie Eyes Return as Mississauga Mayor by Gordon Anderson. On perhaps the hottest day of the year, the former mayor of Mississauga tossed a few coals on the fire. Quote, "I left the current mayor, Carolyn Parrish, with a strong and resilient city with strong fiscal management and low taxes, a plan to build houses that are affordable, and a plan to build transit," Bonnie Crombie said on Tuesday morning in Mississauga. "I left in support of our police chief, we kept taxes low, and we had a vision for the future." Among numerous and ardent supporters on Tuesday, Crombie officially entered the mayoral race in the fourth largest city in Ontario. And despite the heat and the long delay in filing her papers, there was more heat from the ex-Mississauga mayor. Quote, "What I see now is drift, not direction," she said. "I see inaction, a lack of leadership. Taxes are higher. In fact, they have increased 14% over the past 2 years. What we see is increased congestion, increased gridlock. Everything has been at a standstill with so much inaction and inactivity." Parrish took to social media earlier to comment on her competition. Well, Bonnie Crombie announced today, at a community barbecue, that Mississauga needs stable leadership. "I agree," Parrish posted on X, sharing a clip of herself and Crombie on CP24 following Parrish's win in 2024, with Crombie congratulating and showing support for her successor. Crombie stepped down as the city's mayor in June 2024 to run opposite Premier Doug Ford as the provincial Liberal candidate in the 2025 election. Crombie did not win the election against Ford. She resigned as Liberal leader in January of this year. That's all the time we have for this story, which was Bonnie Crombie Eyes Return as Mississauga Mayor by Gordon Anderson. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 14th issue of the Toronto Sun. Your reader has been Melanie Guralnick. Thank you for listening.